Welcome everybody to week 5 here on the Reddit show. I am Zotomo and I'm joined as always by Calamity.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, and our special guest this week is Chicago. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on the show again.
No problem. Thanks for coming. You were on the show last season as well, so we're happy to have you back. Yeah, any takes so far? How's the season been going for you?
It's been going honestly a little bit better than I expected. I'm doing pretty well so far, so I'm pretty happy.
In your returning to an old division, I guess, so to speak, as we'll see in a little bit. But yeah, so let's just jump right in here. We're going to take a look at the Division 1 results. Here we go for Cambodia. And yeah, Calamity, as we all expected, Cambodia proved to be quite the killer here. Very few aces, very few even over 20,000 for Division 1.
Yeah, there were only 6 people who got 2 or more aces over all of the divisions, and I think Ice was the only one who managed 3. So yeah, tough seeds in general. We had a yellow card, unfortunately, for Radu. I don't really know why. I haven't heard anything from him. Not even since the deadline's over. But yeah, it's a good thing for Schludi, who didn't really have a bad performance, but it wasn't anything special either, and you'd have probably expected Radu to beat that if he had played. On the other hand, we had a really close game between Magyaron and Boxer, where Boxer escaped his first loss of the season by the skin of his teeth, just 376, I think, points between the two. Good win for Kevin as well, who needs the points, any points he can get, basically. Yeah, a poor performance from Giovanni, but he did have to ask for an extension, so he might have just not had the necessary time to practice enough.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, very difficult Chicago for our players here.
Yeah, definitely. I think the seed was pretty tricky, I would say, in my opinion. And yeah, as Calamity said, RC picking up a yellow card there, pretty unfortunate for him. So he dropped down the table a bit. And then also want to shout out Raidman for a score above 20,000, the only one in Division 1 this week. And then the newcomers, Baxa and Orpheus, are continuing to do well. Baxa is still undefeated so far.
Yeah, indeed. And so is Mr. Blue in his entire Reddit League career after a season and almost halfway through another one. Still yet to lose anything. Has a couple draws, but Simi unable to give him his first loss in Cambodia. Well, let's take a look at what this means for the table then as we jump into that. Boxa and Mr. Blue keep their places in the top 2. Raidman Mucha moving up to 3rd place with his performance there. Yeah, unfortunately for Simi and Radu, they both drop further down the table and will be looking really difficult to climb up as that gap between the top half of the table, Calamity, is really cementing itself here.
Yeah, the split is still there. It's gone down by like 1 point. I think it was 5 points last week. Now it's 4. But a few of the players in the bottom half can still be very happy about their week, with Schludi picking up a win and Kevin as well. And after Einaglu's win against Orpheus last week, he was looking like a serious challenger for top 4, but this week's loss against Kevin sets him back quite a bit. The good thing for him is, though, that he has already played 3 of the top 5. I think the only one he's not played yet is Raidman, but I might be wrong on that. So he can definitely look forward to some potentially easier matchups in the second half of the season. But yeah, apart from that, I think at this point, any of the top 4 spots will go to the first 6 currently. I don't think you can really catch up so much at this point.
Oh, if that's true, Chicago, that means we will not have a repeat victor here. Simi in that bottom half.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting.
Yeah. Any other interesting trends or worrisome trends you see here in Division 1 table?
Nothing too worrisome so far, I would say. But it's interesting how it's shaping up at this point, and it's still pretty close at the top of the table there as well. Mr. Blue Box is tied with 15 each there.
Yeah, just a 2-point gap over Raidman and Orpheus going into week 6. So let's see who they'll be facing off this week. We are in California, which is probably a relief for a lot of players here. Yeah. So Calamity, any of these matchups that really stand out to you?
Yeah, you obviously get a remake of the final thriller from last season. Simi won his game against Raidman in season 1 in Estonia, and they drew in season 2 in North Macedonia. And then Simi, obviously, as we know, won the final 2-1 with wins in Europe and on the AI generated world map against Raidman's win in Singapore. Probably none of those maps are very representative or really that comparable to California. But the worrisome thing here for Simi is probably his form more than anything else.
Yeah.
But with the experience he has, I'm pretty sure he shouldn't be too bothered by that. It's still going to be a hard challenge, maybe less so because of Simi's bad form, but because of Raidman's good form, and that he can probably go into this game with a lot of confidence. Apart from that, we've got a lot of Americans later on, but Division 1 has only got one with Equinox, and he probably couldn't have asked for a better opponent this week. If you have a slight home advantage in such a place such as California, then you probably want to play against someone who you could usually beat, maybe, but with that additional advantage are pretty certain of a win. And I think that description fits Kevin relatively well. And they're both fighting against sort of relegation in the bottom half of the table as well. So that would be a crucial win for him. Interestingly enough, it's a match that we didn't get to see last season, even though they were both in Division 1 at that point, because Equinox picked up a yellow card there in Kyrgyzstan, that was back then.
Oh, interesting.
And Magyarin against Radu is another interesting match. They played each other long ago in week 11 of season 1, where Radu won in Nigeria. But yeah, for Magyarin, that's a very important game as he's sitting in the bottom of the table, 1 point currently. And Radu, going off of his yellow card, he's surely going to want that win as well.
Indeed. Chicago, any matchups you're looking forward to watching this week?
Yeah, I'm honestly looking forward to all of these matchups. As you pointed out, the Raidman versus Simi match should be pretty interesting. And then, of course, Mr. Blue and Schluty, I'll be looking for Magaron and RC as well. And it'll be interesting to see how the newcomers, Orpheus and Box, do in their head-to-head this week. And of course, the lone American in the division will be interesting to see if they pull out a win this week in Equinox.
Yeah, Kevin Croner being a bit unlucky to have to face off against an American on home soil. So then let's transition over into Division 2 and the results from them. Again, pretty low scores compared to what we have been seeing. Cambodia was also difficult, but I think maybe Division 2 was one of the easier seeds, Chicago.
Yeah, so Division 2 had a pretty interesting seed, in my opinion. There were 4 rounds that were rather straightforward, and then there was one that was basically impossible to pinpoint. And so that led to a lot of scores in the sort of 18 to 20,000 range. And a lot of people, for the sort of tricky one, it was in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of people thought that it was going to be near Phnom Penh in the south. But unfortunately, it was way further north than that. So lots of us dropped points there. So yeah, that was pretty interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, but you do still pick up a win against Verdoc for yourself there. Any other interesting results that you notice?
Yeah, for sure. We had lots of very close scores, especially versus the Real Clyde and Radix. They were only, I think, 200 something points apart there, which is very close, but still no ties out of any matchup this week, which I thought was quite interesting. And then Talampala jumping up to first place with a big score differential against Tezcatak this week.
Indeed. Anything from your Calamity? You do pick up a win against Glacial Resort.
I'm pretty happy about that. Not only about the win, but also about the best score in the division. But yeah, as Chicago's already said, it's 4 relatively easy rounds, and then that almost impossible rounds. And I had the top score of the seed with only 316 points in that round 4. Only a single out of the 35 people who played that seed managed to get more than 500 points in that round. And Tolampala confirmed to me afterwards what I'd already thought after finishing my game, in that it was possible to get to good information in that round, but you had to move very swiftly. No internet issues, no hesitation, and that gave you about 30 seconds roughly at best when you hit the main road. And from then on, it's
Wow.
almost entirely a matter of luck whether you walk the right way and look at the right things with enough speed to leave you at least like 10 seconds to process what you're seeing and get the pin down in the right area, which no one managed to do. Despite those really close results, as Chicago mentioned, no draws, which was quite interesting because we certainly had a lot of people that could have had a draw if they had played against each other, but they just didn't. But yeah, it was an unfortunate week for Radox, who not only lost just about in that game against the Real Clyde, but he also finished 7th for the second week in a row, therefore losing out on another bonus points that would be incredibly helpful for him.
Yeah, well then let's shift over to the Division 2 table and see what that means. Chicago, with your win there, you keep your spot in second place there, but in kicking Verdog all the way down to 6th. Bit unfortunate for him, but still very, very close in the top 7 here, Chicago.
Yeah, as you said, it's all very close. Yeah, the top 5 all tied with 12 points currently. The score differentials are still pretty different there, so that'll be interesting to see how this top half keeps shifting as we go forward. But yeah, unfortunate for Murdoch, they're dropping down to 6th place, and as the the baseman said, winning his match, but still staying down at 7th there.
Yeah, Calamity, the gap here, a little bit further down the table, but it's just as wide. 5 points between him, the basement, and Tesco Tac, and Seppo way at the bottom, still yet to pick up a win.
Yeah, 5 points is actually the second biggest gap we've got in any of the divisions in Reddit League currently. Because all of the favorites pretty much won their games, and the matchups all kind of, except for Verduk against Chicago, had one favorite against one person further towards the bottom. It was inevitable that the gap would, grow a bit. Apart from that, with the way it is, I think, in my opinion, promotion is off the cards for anyone starting from 8th downwards. Similarly to what I was talking about with the playoffs in Division 1. I think they can still have good seasons and finish somewhere around 6th maybe. But for them to make it to the top 4, they need 4 people to drop so many points that I think a top 4 finish is very unlikely.
I see. Yeah. Well, hopefully some of those players in the lower part of the table can turn their luck around coming up in the future. We know that Radox likes to be the eternal relegation survivor, so maybe he's just wanting to continue that streak for himself there, but I think he likes to do better in week 2, but on week 6. But unfortunately for him, he's up against Verdox in this one in California, and Chicago, you're up against Ice.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting matchup. I'm looking forward to that one. And then as for we got 2 Americans going head to head. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's the first time we've had Americans play against each other. So that'll be interesting to see how they do in a U.S. state for sure.
Yeah, Calamity, is this the first time we actually have American Derby in Division 2, despite there being so many?
I'm not actually sure. It might be. Let me actually quickly check that. You can talk about something else in the meantime.
Well, the interesting thing is we get 2 of them, the Real Clyde and Guelo Wizard, as well as Tesco Tac and Blockchain Prenup. So if we do actually have this first time we get an American Derby in Division 2, we get 2 of them in the same week.
Yeah,
so
I can actually correct you, which is quite funny because the one who's actually already had an American Derby is you against
that's right.
against the Real Clyde in week 4. But yeah, that's certainly interesting, especially that we get 2 of them in the US stage, which we couldn't have gotten more of them. As I've said, interesting thing here might be, which I said to Chicago earlier on before we started recording, that I feel like some Americans might potentially get a bit complacent, thinking they've got the home advantage here, they don't need to practice so much, which I think could hurt them depending on where exactly they're from in the US, because a state like California can play completely differently than some of the states we had in the last season, like Pennsylvania and Minnesota. But there's certainly a few very interesting matchups here. Apart from the 2 American derbies, we've also got Tall Impala against me and Ice against Chicago, sort of at the top of the table, fighting it out, where I don't think a loss for either of us is going to be the end of the world, but fighting for promotion you'll of course want every advantage you can get as we head into the second half of the season. There's a couple more interesting things about the blockchain and Tescotac matchup I'd like to mention, because they've both been in Division 2 since the start of Reddit League. And interestingly enough, they've both always finished next to each other in the table. In Season 1, it was 5th and 6th, and in Season 2, it was 6th and 7th. And Tescotac always had the upper hand there, but despite that, Blockchain actually won both of their matches, with Tescotac having a shocker in Bangladesh in Season 1. So it seems like Southeast Asian countries are a problem for him in general, with his weak performance in Cambodia this week as well. And a bit of a closer game on a balanced world in Season 2. So it'll be interesting how that storyline develops in this season.
Yeah, I definitely think the matchup between you and Tom Paul is kind of the sweaty matchup of the week. Both of you are known to practice quite a bit, and I was going to see who can put the hours in and come out on top on that one. So, I hopefully, and you both record, so I'm definitely looking forward to maybe even casting that one come next week. So, well, let's move on to Division 3 and their results in Cambodia. And as the trend has been, very low scores overall. Max Devi with an interesting score there. 5 ones in a row. I had to, check my eyes there to make sure I did the right number of them when I was entering these scores. But that is correct. Other than that, nothing too surprising. Winners still pretty much kept winning, but the scores overall dropping, Calamity.
Yeah, we had another tricky seed for Division 3, again, after, I think it was Uruguay in Week 1, which was already terrible. And it was the lowest average score out of all the divisions. Despite some less than spectacular performances, as you said, the favorites kept winning, and especially Patriots can count as lucky stars that not even 12,000 points was enough for a win here against Max. Apart from that, we had great games from Closed and Ferret, who both lost their last game in Week 4, so that gets them back up in the table a bit.
Yeah. Anything stand up for you, Chicago?
Division 3 had another typically tough Cambodian seed. And it's interesting, newcomer Shumi is continuing to do well, picking up another win there. And then I'm also pretty happy to see Ferret grab another win. I might be biased, but Ferret's one of my Twitch mods, so always happy to see him do well.
Nice. Very good. Well, let's see how this table is shaping up for Division 3. Shumi and Patriots keep their top spots. Theos moving down a bit with Dem Freckles and Closed jumping up a bit in the table. The biggest mover was Skydiving Ferret, who jumps all the way up into 8th place. I believe he was 11th before. So quite a big jump with that win for him, despite his still negative score differential. But yeah, Calamity, this might be one of our closest divisions, at least in the top 3 here for everybody.
Yeah, in terms of the differences between all of the players, there's no really big gap anywhere, which is something that we have quite a bit in the other divisions. There's one exception to that, one major exception that we'll get to later. But yeah, as a little sneak peek, because you mentioned it earlier, we will probably have Ferret on as a guest later on in the season as well. But yeah, Omkar that's actually a mistake you did there with the arrows on the side, because he lost his game, so he kind of gone up. But he's sort of falling down the table. He had 2 wins at the start of the season, one of them obviously due to the yellow card of, I think it was Freckles. And his total score is also quite worrying for him. He's over 6,000 points behind second last. I think that's just a bit of the limitations of preseason coming in. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but over the course of only 5 weeks, there will be inevitably some players that end up above or below their skill level. And I think that's what we might see here. He might prove me wrong in the following weeks, but so far he looks a bit out of his depth in the division.
Yeah, Chicago, not getting any better for Slovak for at all. But other than that, things pretty much settling in the middle of the table at least.
Yeah, for sure. It's as you've mentioned, it's very, very close right now. Between 4th and 10th place, just 4 points separating them. So that'll be interesting to see if that closeness will start to change as we keep on going. But yeah, unfortunate for Slovaks there, still sitting at last.
Yeah, well, let's look at who they'll be facing off against in week 6. Any interesting things here from you, Calamity? I'll give you first shot at it.
Yeah, we got sort of a half derby here with Slovak living in the US against Patriots. Um, Unfortunately for him, that's not going to be any easy of a matchup. Patriots had a weak performance in Cambodia, and I think he had a weak performance in Belgium as well. He had one in one of the previous weeks. I'm not entirely sure which one it was anymore. But he'll probably come back with a great performance this week again, so Slovak will have to pull out a great performance of his own to match him. Apart from that, we've got 2 matches between people who've been in Division 2 against people who've been in Division 4, in Max against Benica and Freckles against Closed. And they both could be rather interesting. I wouldn't really favor either of them in either of the matchups. The thing is, Freckles, if you want to play against Freckles in any sort of map, then I think a US state is about as good as you can get. He's historically performed relatively badly there, so Closed can probably be happy about the scheduling there, at least for him to have that opportunity. And yeah, it's a very important match for Hugo as well against Omkar. With the way Omkar's performed so far, Hugo will have to see this as a must-win if he wants to get out of the relegation fight.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's something that Hugo can possibly win. I think it's going to be interesting to see if Riddick can, stop Shumi being on a bit of home soil, Chicago.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the matchups I'm most interested to see this week. Yeah, Shumi's perhaps the favorite just based on the table right now, but yeah, Red has that home soil advantage, so that'll be an interesting match for sure. And also interesting to see 2 American players facing off against 2 representing Africa there.
Interesting indeed. Well, let's jump to Division 4A and their results in Cambodia. Again, proved to be very tricky, and we saw some scores here below 10,000, I think, for the first time, Chicago.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, for Division 4, another pretty rough seed, I would say. But we did have some decent scores there, especially out of H-Town with 23,126. So that moved them up the table a bit. And then perhaps a little bit unlucky for Bath Jets there, who had the 3rd highest score in the division, but still ended up with a loss and then a pretty high score difference there as well. And then Wakelock perhaps getting a little bit lucky there with the bye week. Not the highest score of all time, but fortunate for it to happen on a map like Cambodia for sure.
Yeah, Calamity, LNC getting a win there, but also getting a win by a large margin, so that'll help his score differential.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to see how that comes into play later on in the season. I don't think Division 4 will be too that the score difference will be too important for this division, but we'll see. It can never hurt. As you said, for Wakelock, he probably didn't practice too much, to be honest, in Cambodia, especially considering you're never going to get a bonus point in Cambodia, especially when you're a Division 4 player. No offense. But yeah, great performance from H-Town. And there were 2 standout performers in the Division 4 seed. We'll talk about the other one in Division 4B. But for H-Town, if he continues to perform like this, he might still have a chance to fight for promotion. In terms of total score as well, he's pretty far up there. So he might be a dark horse to catch up and maybe fight for those 3 spots after all.
Indeed. Well, let's take a look at the Division 4A table. Barry Fishy Bear does get handed his first loss, but MD Spaceman continues his unbeaten streak and his spot at the top of the table. But probably the most interesting thing here is the top of the table didn't change at all in Division 4A. A bit of shuffling down to the bottom. Wakelock moving up with his fortunate bye week against what would have been Mabos. But other than that, yeah, things pretty much seem to be, at least for the last couple weeks, haven't been changing too much, Chicago, here in the table, despite any of the results we have.
Yeah, I would say so too. Yeah, it's interesting the top 4 there not moving, and Spaceman keeping up the win streak there, undefeated this season. But yeah, as you said, not too much changing as of right now.
Calamity, anything shaping up here in Division 4A?
Yeah, the win from Headache Me against Barry Fishy Bear was obviously important for him as well, just to keep the closeness between the top players a bit more, like, together a bit more. If Barry Fishy Bear had won that game, we would be looking at, well, depending on if Headache Me would have gotten the bonus points, anywhere between from like a 4 to a 3 point gap between third and fourth. And as we are now in the divisions that only have 9 match weeks, that would already be kind of a big gap forming there. But as it is, I still think top 5 are going to be the people who will fight for the promotion spots, obviously favoring now the top 3, especially because they're all Americans and now coming up to their home map, so to speak, in California. I think from what I've seen, MD Spaceman and Barry Fishy Bear are both from California, or at least somewhere close to there.
Or have lived there, yeah.
Yeah. So they will both definitely be looking to get another win there. And yeah, I think that'll be how it'll go for the end of the season. Top 5, 4 Americans out of those, and we'll see if Headache Me can keep up with them.
Indeed. Yeah, Calamity did mention it, that this Division 4 and 5 have only 10 players as they're split across 2 groups. So we are, after that week, over the halfway mark for the season already, which flies by. Let me tell you. Let's see how the matchups are looking for week 6. We avoid any American derbies here. Looks like everybody's playing somebody else. H-Town maybe would have had something against Mabos, but he's getting the bye week instead. So yeah, Chicago, anything you're looking forward to here?
Yeah, it should be interesting to see how the Americans do here against their European opponents for sure. And then perhaps a curse and a blessing for H-Town there, having the bye week against Mabos, although perhaps more of a blessing. Mabos probably would have put up a good fight in California. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens here for sure.
Calamity, do you think MD Spaceman can continue his unbeaten run against Hedemik here?
I think this is about as good of a matchup, or as good of a week as any, for me to get the sentence out, to face Headache Me off against in sort of his home map. And it'll definitely be interesting in this division specifically to later next week take a look at and see how big the home advantage actually ended up being with 3 American against European matches here. Yeah, obviously, as you said, MD Spaceman Headache Me is probably the match to look forward to, but also Nitnarok against Wakelok at the other side of the table will be very interesting, because both of them so far have picked up 1 win, and Wakelok an additional through a yellow card against Mabos, or a red card in that case, I think it already was. So both of them really need their wins to not be in those 2 relegation playoff spots.
One thing to mention is that while Ponum has the Wales flag, he does live on the west coast of the United States. So he's not a native of the area per se, but he does have some little local knowledge. So again, maybe one of those half derbies we've got. I didn't remember that till just now, but he might be able to give LCN a run for his money here, but given their recent run of forms, I'm pretty sure we can still kind of give the win there to LCN. So we'll see though. He might be able to do something. But let's take a look then at the other half of Division 4, Division 4B, and those matchups in week 5. Again, some pretty low numbers, but our second real standout in Cambodia with Nakiro Calamity.
Yeah. As I said, in Division 4A for H-Town, Division 4B had Nakuru with a great score, almost 8,000 points ahead of anyone else in his division. And Steel the Snick, even though he had an okay performance, 14,570, that's at least the 3rd best score of his division still. So he'll pick up a bonus point for that. But yeah, his first loss of his Reddit League career. Apart from that, you losing against Polyboss, not ideal for you, I take it. We've also have GRH against Pork Steaks, which Mr. Blue mentioned to me. He thought it was the first game in the history of the league which had a winner under 10,000 points. It's not actually. We had that in last season in Kyrgyzstan in Division 3 with Freckles losing with 2,700 points against MD Spaceman with 3,800. But that's still always interesting to see people winning games with less than 10,000 points. And either way, another unfortunate loss there for Deep Thought as well. His second loss in a row now. So for someone who was relatively close to getting promoted last season, this season so far hasn't really gone to plan for him yet. But yeah, credit where credit's due. A good performance from Edward as well to beat him there.
Yeah, doing quite well and moves him up from the lower part of the table. Anything from you here, Chicago, in Division 4B?
Yes, so as you mentioned, Nakaro getting a very good score there. I believe the second highest of any division this week, so that's pretty impressive. But unfortunate for Nick there, his first loss, and also by a pretty large margin as well. But otherwise, yeah, not too much noteworthy here in my opinion. But yeah, things are still pretty close.
Yeah, one sad thing is I did get an ace in my game, which just tells you how poorly I did on some of the other rounds, given that my total score wasn't even 11,000, and 5,000 points from those came in one round. So, yeah, very difficult seed. I think there was I thought it was very difficult, but then I looked at Nakiro's score and said, "Holy cow!" Got to watch his video, see what he did. To be able to do that, but I think it probably just practice. He put in the effort, trying to do a good job in this as a newcomer in the Reddit League. So definitely showing us all that it could have been done, even though most of us weren't able to do it. So let's take a look at what that means for the table here. Yeah, Deep Thought Calamity, as he mentioned, with that loss, drops all the way down into 6th place there. Yeah, so Calamity, this table still pretty close though. Even despite his loss, he's only a point or two off of the promotion spots.
Yeah, this is another table that looks very close at the moment, and I think personally anyone from 8th place upwards still has a chance to get towards promotion. But yeah, as we said before, with how short the season is for the people here, results need to start coming in now if you still have quite a few points to catch up, and probably the people up there won't make it any easier for you.
Yeah, still this Nick, even despite his loss, still keeps top spot. Chicago, anything you noticing from this table?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Nick's still at the top there, and yeah, the standings are still fairly close as well. 3 people with 10 points right now, and everyone up there kind of moving up one spot this week too. So yeah, things are still pretty close. So it'll be interesting to see what happens and if anyone from a bit lower down the table can work their way back up.
Indeed. Well, let's see how we fancy their chances in week 6 as we look at those. Anything for you here, Calamity, besides my, as you always tell me, must-win matchups?
Yeah, I think I did right here, down here, must win Zotomo, yes. I
It's going to be on there every single week, so
no, but yeah,
don't erase it.
Yeah, definitely is a must win again for you, but also a must win very crucially for GRH77, as he is American, the only one in this division apart from Pork Steaks. Against Polyboss, it won't be easy against the second in the table, but if he can't win here, then he's probably as good as relegated, to be honest. Apart from that, I'm interested in Edward against Nakiro. Both of them had pretty good performances in Cambodia, so that'll be interesting as well. They're not far apart in the table, 4th and 7th, only split apart by 3 points. So if Edward manages to get a win here, he'll have almost caught up with the promotion fighters. But yeah, Steal the Sneak against Noisel should be a bit of an easier match up again this week for Steal the Sneak. But he mentioned in the Red League, we're jinxing him with with our predictions of him winning. Yeah, it's first against third, but Noisel, I think, actually, let me quickly double check that because his score difference is so good that I'm kind of not doubting myself. No, it is right. His total score isn't anything particularly great. He's about 10,000 points behind Steal the Sneak in that. But yeah, definitely, regardless of that, not an opponent to underestimate.
Yeah, I'm double checking, but I thought that Steal the Snick either played in or hosted a tournament entirely around California. I might be a figment of my imagination. I've been going through all the old tournaments and I thought there was a recent like California themed one and his name was somehow associated with it, but I don't seem to be able to confirm that right now. Maybe somebody in the comments can help us out. But again, with this one, we do have a little bit of another kind of half derby. I used to live in California while it was some years ago, so we're going to see how my memory plays off. But anything you're looking forward to here, Chicago?
Yeah, I'm honestly looking forward to a lot of these matchups. I think one of the more crucial ones this week is the Pork Sticks versus Deep Thought matchup. So Pork Sticks, of course, an American will be looking to win there, but it's important for Deep Thought to hold on to that top half of the table currently. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there for sure.
Indeed, yeah. Deep Thought gave me a bit of difficulty in the first week with getting a draw, but other than since then, he's kind of evened out down with me. So, yeah. Well, let's take a look at the results for Division 5A with this one. And yeah, Chicago, that one weird girl picking up a win in her American Derby against Jay Lyons here.
Yeah, for sure. That was a very close matchup there, and perhaps a little bit of an unfortunate loss for Jay Lyons as a result. But that was definitely an interesting game to see. Then we also had Marcus Finn putting up the best score of the division, which was fortunate for them. And then Anna NZ unfortunately hasn't caught a break yet. It's still 0 for 5 this season with the 6,000 points score differential this week. But yeah, otherwise nothing too surprising there in my opinion.
Yeah, nothing too much. Clem, anything from you here?
Yeah, I can just quickly confirm to you that it was Steal the Snick who did the Geoguessr Tour of California about 4 months ago, which ran for, I think it was 7 or 8 stages. So he does have some experience with California. I don't know how actively he took part in that as an organizer, but he should at least be experienced with it somewhat. Yeah, as you mentioned, that one we'd got Jake Lyons. It was actually the closest matchup of the week. We didn't get a single draw over all of Reddit League, and this match was like 2 points closer than Radux against Clyde in Division 2. Apart from that, yeah, great performance from Marcus Fenn here. Probably, maybe even the most surprising performance for me from the whole season yet. He finished last in preseason, though that was mostly due to him sort of rage quitting Malaysia in week 5 of that. But still, I don't think Cambodia's actually it plays way differently than Malaysia, now that I think about it. But it is sort of a Southeast Asian country, so at least in that sense they're quite similar. But yeah, another very important win here for Diesel as well against Hexouts. They were both fighting for promotion and probably still are. But with that win, Diesel comes a bit closer and Hexout drops off a bit. And also a crucial win for Diffs as well against Zenith, because he was kind of down there with NNZ so far, and that win puts him back up into the pack and kind of leaves NNZ down there at the table on his own.
Yeah, definitely nice to see Diffs there, a fellow Formula G driver, showing us some skill there, getting almost 20,000 in Cambodia, which proved to be a very difficult week for a lot of people. Let's take a look at how that table then is shaping up. Jay Lyons with that loss drops all the way down into 4th. He was at the top of the table. That One World Girl reclaims her top spot. Yeah, and unfortunately for Diffs, that win does get him 3 points, but doesn't move him out of 9th. It's very crowded in the middle of the table there, Chicago.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, lots of close scores there. But unfortunately, we have Anna NC down there at the bottom with 6 points between 9th and 10th place there. So perhaps unfortunate there. But yeah, One Weird Girl moving up to the top again. But otherwise, yeah, still pretty close.
Yeah, Clem, anything from you here on the Division 5A table?
Yeah, this is simultaneously the table that has the biggest gap in it, with 6 points between 9th and 10th, but also at the same time, in my opinion, is the closest one overall, with only 6 points separating 9th from 1st place. It's really all up in the air. I do think that the first 5, maybe 6, although Lab and Grab, I think, has been pretty inconsistent so far, are going to be the ones that will fight for the promotion spots. Yeah, apart from that, NNZ, I think at this point it's unlikely that he'll be able to get himself out of that position. And even if he does, he'd need to be 7th or higher. Actually, is it 7th or higher or is it 6th? I think it's 7th or higher. You need to be 7th or 6th, and then you're in the relegation playoff. 8th, 9th, and 10th are all automatically relegated. So I think that's unlikely at this point for him.
Yeah, the relegation here in Division 5, the bottom division, just simply means you have to re-qualify the following season, so you don't automatically keep your spot. So if there's any newcomers who can, kind of snip one of those spots away from you, you could be out of luck there. But yeah, pretty rough for Division 5, having to face requalification.
Yeah, that's
So
definitely.
they'll all be fighting to avoid that. But
Yeah, generally, I'd be surprised if any of the people who get demoted from Division 5 actually manage to requalify. It would have to be because there's not enough newcomers applying. Because apart from that, generally every sort of season we get a lot of newcomers who can perform better and place themselves in a better position than any of the players here managed to do before. So it'd be a surprise to me if any of them managed to get back in the first attempt at requalification, at least.
at least it's all close, which means we can't count anybody out of it quite yet, which is good for all of these players here in Division 5A. Well, let's look at the matchups for Week 6. It doesn't get any easier for Diffs or Anna and Z Chicago.
Yeah, unfortunate for a lot of players. We got sort of people at the top playing against people at the bottom, apart from Laban and TDYS there, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, Clement, any predictions here for Division 5A?
Yeah, I'm very interested in that one weird goal against Hexalt because technically on any other map, or well, any non-US map, I would have favorited Hexalt here, even though that one weird goal is currently leading the division. But because it is California, I think that evens it out a bit and maybe even slightly pushes the favorite role to that one weird goal. But that can definitely be a very close matchup. I don't know how good Hexalt is in the US, but that could be very interesting. And also Marcus Fenn against Zenit, in my opinion, is an interesting matchup. There, as I've said, Marcus, after a pretty poor preseason, he's now put himself into third place already. So he's looking pretty good right now. And Zenit, after a poor week in Cambodia, she'll probably be looking at making up some ground again because she's getting dangerously close to those relegation spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's interesting is California is definitely a pinpointable map, and there's quite some weird things going on in Division 5A with the aces. I actually forgot to mention that when we looked at the table. But Diesel, J-Lions, and Hexal all have 10 plus aces, but the people around them have half. One Little Girl and Marcus only have 2 and 1 apiece, respectively. So in a map where you could get very good signs and aces are very likely to happen, we could see that gap grow even more, and that might give them a slight advantage if they can pick up even just 10 points in a round or two above their opponent. So that'll be interesting to see how that shapes up in next week in California. Well, our final group here, Division 5B, and their results in Cambodia. Things not too surprising, Calamity.
Yeah, I forgot to mention as well when we talked about the results of 5A, but it fits here just the same. So I was surprised how generally low the average was in the scores of Division 5 because it was, in my opinion, by far the easiest seed. And we only really had Baba here with 24,278 points, who really had a great performance. Apart from that, we've got Katsash here with not even 11,000 points, and therefore giving the win on a silver platter to Papagato, which is something that he can't really afford, considering his position on the table. He really would have needed those 3 points in the promotion fight. Apart from that, Danny Blonde's again unfortunate, losing another close game, but again picking up another bonus point here, so it's not too bad for him. And yeah, Farban and Joguer, the two Frenchmen, keep winning. They've won every game so far that they actually competed in, taking out of account the week 1 match from Farban. And it seems like the only one who can follow them so far is Jack Hertzberg with his performance and relatively dominant win here against Vincenzo.
Yeah, indeed. We've been talking about Bubba the Bubba for a while. His aces are kind of almost unusually high in Division 5 compared to his fellow competitors, but he's way towards the bottom of the table. And finally, a good performance here in Cambodia sees him bump himself up a few places. Anything from you here, Chicago, on Division 5B?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Bubba getting the very good score there. I believe the highest out of any division this week. So that was quite impressive, moving up the table a bit there. And then Geoguessr still undefeated so far this season. And as you said, yeah, the two Frenchmen in the division this year, doing quite well for themselves.
Very good. Well, let's jump over to that Division 5B table. Karzaj, with his loss, drops all the way down to fourth position. Jax and Farabon move up a bit. Yeah, Farabon continuing his charge up the table after his disastrous week one, kind of basically no-show that happened due to technical difficulties. And another 0-5 Calamity. Steven, another kind of returning player who's not having the best season, just like Anna and Z.
Yeah, Steven's just not been having the greatest of times in Reddit League. I hope he's at least having fun playing week in and week out. He's been here since Division 1, and he's always been relegated. Not Division 1, Season 1, where he was in Division 3 alongside me. And then he dropped to Division 4 last season, and now he dropped to Division 5, and it's not looking good for him in this season either. The most interesting thing for me about this table is something that we can't actually see here, but the total scores are all over the place. The two highest in terms of total score are Danny Blondes in 6th and Baba in 7th. And that especially will make it very difficult for the people from 8th to 10th to get themselves out of that relegation zone, because the two people above them that are sort of in range points-wise are very good players that will probably pick up more points as the season progresses. And probably, I think just looking at performances so far, the one most likely to fall down again is Papagato. But from 8th to 5th place, it's already a 5-point gap. So with only 4 weeks to go, and with the people from 8th to 10th not having picked up that many points yet, I think it's unlikely that he'll fall down further than 7th. But the one good thing for the people from 8th to 10th is that they haven't played against each other at all yet. So I think it's unlikely that more than one of them can make their way out, but possibly one of them can do it if they win all of their matches against the others around that zone.
Yeah, it's something we kind of underestimate, is that if you can't beat the top players in division, you can still place well by beating the people around you, and that kind of boosts you up in the table a bit more than maybe your skill would normally indicate, because if everybody else around you is losing a few and you're picking up one or two here, it'll just boost you above them in the table. Especially, it could come even down to score differential. If you're losing half yours, they're losing half of their games, and you're just slightly better in one or two matchups with that score differential, it could really give you a place or two in the table for them. But let's see who they'll be facing off in. And I think this might be the only division we have one American in with Bubba the Bubba, Chicago.
Yeah, that'll be interesting for sure. The lone American in this division. We'll see how they can do against Danny Blondes there. Again, pretty close in the table there. And yeah, that'll be an interesting match for sure. Otherwise, the two French people in this division, Joger and Farabon, that'll be an interesting match there at the top of the table as well. So I'll be keeping an eye out for that one too.
Yeah, Calamity, Papagato, and Steven, a recurring fixture.
Wait, is it actually?
Were they in different groups last season?
To be fair, I kind of forgot looking at that. Give me a second. While I'm looking that up, I can also tell you that I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the only division with one American in it, considering I specifically mentioned that Equinox was the only American in Division 1.
Oh, that's right, Division 1. Well, that was like an hour ago.
Fair.
You can't expect me to remember that.
Yeah, you are right that they've played before. In round 2 of last season, Steven won by only 348 points in Brazil. And
I thought they were in the same.
Yeah, he'll have to hope that he can repeat that if he wants more points than 0. But yeah, I think every matchup in this division has something going for it at the moment. Vincenzo against the 59 Soundbites, also very interesting. I've mentioned it before. Those are the two who are in 8th and 9th at the moment. So if you lose this game, I think you're pretty much out of the division. Then we've also got Danny Blondes against Bubba as the aforementioned two with the highest total score in the division. Then we've got the French derby at the top with Geoguessr and Faraban, and of course Jack Hertzberg against Karzaj, which will be very important for both of them in 2nd and 4th. Karzaj going off of his relatively poor performance in Cambodia, and he'll definitely need to win that as well, because otherwise at least one of the people above him will sort of escape his reach, whether that be Geoguessr or Faraban, as well as Jack Hertzberg, and that kind of puts him in the position where he can at best be 3rd, kind of, and that's not really the position he probably wants to be in.
Yeah, at the start of the season, we didn't have a whole lot to say about Division 5A or Division 5B as well, with all these newcomers, but after 5 weeks, we definitely have gotten a grip on how things are going, and definitely are interested in seeing how these players perform. Yeah, that Karzaj and Jack Hertzberg matchup is going to be a great one to follow. Really going to mean a lot for that table, as well as the French derby happening when both of those players are pretty high up on the table. So it actually has a little bit more weight to it, not just a derby for the sake of some interesting casting. Well, that does it for all the divisions. Hope you enjoyed that segment. We've got one more thing before we go, and that is California. The map itself, as we take a look at that, it is a map by Super Cabas. It has an average score of 16,468, which seems low. Has over 150,000 locations. So no repeat locations, but still practicable, I would assume, given that it's a state, not an entire country or continent. It's been played just over 1,000 times. That's mainly due because it's a very new map, Calamity.
Yeah, but I didn't actually check when it was made. But yeah.
The last date on it was last month.
Okay.
So it could have been, well, because it does updated. And so it might have been created last month, or at least within the last few months.
Yeah, because it is a polygonal map, I would assume that's not normally a map you'd update, really. So it might just be the creation date. There's a lot of bullet points I've sort of written down about California. It happens to be in most countries or any other maps we play, you've usually got like 1 or 2 things, maybe even 3 that you look out for. I've written down 5 things here. Starting with city recognition, which is more crucial usually the smaller you get, and especially in California, you'll find lots of signs that mention sort of relatively small in comparison to the big cities in the cities, but that are still it's very important to recognize them if you see one of them. Apart from that, you've got area codes to learn. You'll find area codes in California a lot, mostly in the cities, so those are definitely the most important ones to learn. Generally, also what you really want to know about is the ones that are close to the big cities. For example, Los Angeles is 213, and west of Los Angeles is 310. Because the thing is, just by the way these cities work, they're usually grown together over time. So if you're somewhere west of Los Angeles, you usually can't really tell that it's part of Los Angeles, but it will often be like, it looks like a city, and it actually is a city in theory, but on the map you can't really see the name oftentimes because it just gets hidden by Los Angeles and any of the other big cities around. So if you know the area codes that surround the big cities, that can be very helpful. Probably also pretty important to know at least the ones that cover a very large space. For example, 707 is the whole like northwestern half, and 760 is the whole southeastern half. Those are just very, very nice to learn because they cover a huge distance. And I've seen 707 especially a lot of times in practice in an area that is generally pretty empty. So that can definitely help you out a bunch there. You can also learn counties if you want to. The thing is, I've practiced California quite a bit. You don't see county road signs often, but you do see them occasionally. Probably if you have the time to practice, look at which county signs you generally see and remember those, because you're probably unlikely to see county signs in a lot of places that aren't those counties anyway. Especially like, for example, in Los Angeles, you're not going to see a county road sign, just things like that. You've also got landscape, of course. California is relatively diverse, especially so for an American state, because it's also quite large. It has mountains sort of all the way along the eastern side of the states, and sort of a flat, almost desert-like area in the center, down from north to south. And it's relatively forested in the north and sort of in the south in parts as well, and on the west coast, but not so much there. And then the one other thing I'd like to mention, because I noticed it during practice as well, is state highways are kind of interesting in California, because you'll see them a lot. The thing is, if you see a state highway in a city, you're not actually very likely to find that state highway, because it usually is just in that city. So most of the time you'll do better by just looking for the city name somewhere, or an area code, for example, because you just won't find the state highway unless you check every city individually, which probably will take more time than just finding out the name of the city. And yeah, I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to mention. Some of the state highways will be very familiar with you if you practice quite a bit. 99, for example, is a relatively useful one. 299 as well. But yeah, I think that's it now.
Thank you, Calamity. Yeah, Chicago, we do have an American with us today. So any advice or any thoughts about California?
Yeah, for sure. Calamity's given us a great profile of the state so far. As he mentioned, the landscape of California, I think, is going to be a really important thing here, because as he said, California is a very large state and very diverse as well. So yeah, learning those landscape regions will come into play in a lot of the games this week. Additionally, yeah, the area codes as well will be important. There are quite a few of them in California, since again, it's quite large, but it'll be interesting to see who does their practice to learn those this week as well. But yeah, I think California in general is a fairly forgiving state, but if you end up in the desert or the mountains, it'll be kind of tricky to pinpoint as well as find good signs. So it'll come down to where each round is located as well, if California will be forgiving or not.
Yeah, I think it really can be. You could get a lot of urban locations given the amount of population in California, where you could get a map with 2 or 3 locations in the kind of the northern mountains and desert when you got nothing for a couple of minutes. So it could be really tricky, especially for some of the higher divisions, like Division 1 and 2, where the time limit is a little bit less, which could make it a little bit harder to find things. But yeah, I definitely think that what Calamity mentioned is knowing those smaller town names, or at least what might count as a town name on things like road signs or billboards or something, because you have 2 really huge kind of mega cities in San Francisco and Los Angeles, where there is no border between the towns. It's one to the next, to the next, to the next. And you won't see it on a map unless you're really zoomed in, because the bigger town names cover everything. And it might even look like they're neighborhoods in Los Angeles, but they're not neighborhoods. They are cities. And so their signage and everything will be a bit different for sure. But as someone who's lived in California, all I can really say is, for me, there's a very different feel to the architecture, to the cities, how they're built, and things between, especially the Los Angeles area and everything to the northern part of the state. So pay attention to a lot. It's only one state, but it's very diverse. There's a lot of information out there. And it's, of course, as America, it's always well labeled. So that'll always be nice. But are you looking forward to playing California? I think Calamity plays a little bit early, so he plays very fast. So he's already got some firsthand experience. But Chicago, are you looking forward to this map?
Yeah, I would say so for sure. I'm definitely going to try and put in a bit of practice here to just get my head in the game for sure. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to try and learn some area codes, practice my landscape recognition, and just sort of hope for the best, I think.
Yeah, Calamity, without giving too much away, your final thoughts?
Yeah, California actually turned out to be less bad than I thought initially. In that I did very poorly when I first started practicing it, but just putting in the practice turned out like pretty good after all. And especially things like learning error codes and stuff like that was very helpful. So this will definitely be probably actually a week where you wouldn't expect it, just as a US state, but this will definitely be a week where practice will really show itself.
Okay, well, you heard it here, folks. Put in the practice. It will reap you some rewards. And thank you all for watching. We always enjoy covering all the action in the Reddit League. And we hope you all enjoyed being along for the ride and seeing what's going on in every division, even if you aren't competing in it. Yeah, so we'll see you all next week in California. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.